Alright, so we left off with this last word from Faber when Montag was remembering the initial meeting with him in the park. Faber is obviously going to be an important figure as a guide and mentor for Montag to start to try to understand things. And Faber had said to him, "I don't talk things, sir. I talk the meaning of things. I sit here and know I'm alive." What's going on here? Why was Faber talking that way? So Faber took a huge risk. He secretly had a book of poetry that he was reading, hid it in his jacket when Montag came up, but then actually read Montag a few poems secretly. He says, "I don't talk things, I talk the meaning of things. I sit here and know I'm alive." So Faber's going to show it's the meaning that matters, not necessarily the medium. Pen is acting weird, sorry. Alright, not necessarily the medium. What do we mean by medium? It's the type of media. So is it, is it a book? Is it TV? Is it radio? Etc. So it's what's being said that matters more, which Faber's going to talk about later. It's not like you couldn't have deep television or deep other forms of deep media, but it's about knowledge. He knows something, it's about knowledge. That was all there was to it, really. An hour of monologue, a poem, a comment, and then without even acknowledging the fact that Montag was a fireman, Faber, with a certain trembling, wrote his address on a slip of paper. "For your file," he said, "in case you decide to be angry with me." "I'm not angry," Montag said, surprised. So now we have this incident with Faber, which actually may have gone back further before Clarice. And Faber knew Montag was a fireman and took a risk anyway. Alright, that's going to be important. Now, I'm going to skip a bit down here. And going to notice next thing Montag starts to talk about is the actual book that he stole. So as he remembered Faber, he goes back, looks up Faber's name in their fireman database and calls him up, and he asks him, "Professor Faber, I have a very odd question to ask. How many copies of the Bible are left in the country?" "I don't know what you're talking about. I want to know if there are any copies left at all. This is some sort of trap. I can't talk to just anyone on the phone. How many copies of Shakespeare and Plato?" "None. You know as well as I do. None." Faber hung up. Montag put down the phone. "None." A thing he knew from, of course, from the firehouse listings, but somehow he had wanted to hear it from Faber himself. In the hall, Mildred's face was suffused with excitement. "Wow, the ladies are coming over." Montag showed her a book. This is the old a New Testament. And don't start that again. It might be the last copy in this part of the world. All right. So what's going on here? What does Montag actually have? He's got a copy of the Bible. Last copy of the Bible. Maybe in the world, maybe in that part of the world. We've already had a reference to the Bible with Captain Beatty's reference to the Tower of Babel, but we're going to see this is a very important book. Why? It's historical. It's got theology in it, philosophy. It's got different genres of literature. There are, poems. There's narrative. You've got things like apocalyptic literature. Running out of space here, etc. Lots and lots of genres in the Bible. The Bible is also like a library, actually, because there are 66 books. So it's a collection of books, and it's divided into 39 books in what Montag calls here and what we call the Old Testament, and then 27 books in the New Testament. All right. Also, this book is the most burned and banned book pretty much in history. Under the Romans and many other ancient civilizations like the Babylonians and the Assyrians, they captured the different people groups that are identified as the writers of the Bible, the ancient Jewish people. New Testament is about the times of Jesus, and the Old Testament is before Jesus, so we say BC, AD, when we refer to those time periods. So it's a very important book historically. It's an important book culturally, as it shapes Western culture largely. And so it's very important that this is the actual book that he's got. You've got to hand it back tonight, don't you know? Captain Beatty knows you've got it, doesn't he? I don't think he knows which book I stole, but how do I choose a substitute? Do I turn in Mr. Jefferson, Mr. Thoreau? Which is least valuable? If I pick a substitute, Beatty knows which book I stole. I guess he'll guess we have an entire library here. Mildred's mouth twitched. See what you're doing? You'll ruin us. What's more important, me or that Bible? She was beginning to shriek now, sitting there like a wax doll melting in its own heat. He could hear Beatty's voice. Sit down, Montag. Watch delicately like the petals of a flower. Light the first page, light the second page. Each becomes a black butterfly. Beautiful, eh? Light the third page from the second, and so on. Chain smoking, chapter by chapter. All the silly things the words mean. All the false promises. All the second-hand notions and time-worn philosophies. There sat Beatty, perspiring gently, the floor littered with swarms of black moths that had died in a single storm. Mildred stopped screaming as quickly as she started. Montag was not listening. There's only one thing to do, he said. Sometime before tonight, when I give the book to Beatty, I've got to have a duplicate made. So what Montag wants to look for is book reprinting. And where would you do that? Maybe on a printing press. And he's gonna think about where to do that. Mildred obviously is freaking out. We'll skip down a little bit. He leaves, slams the door, jumps on the subway. Now, as he's going in the subway, we're going to see this battle between brainwashing. Okay, so there's a battle between brainwashing, media, and memory and retention. Because he's going to try to memorize. Okay? That connects to oral traditions of ancient texts were all passed down by word of mouth through memorization. And much of the Bible was also memorized and passed down, and then the scribes came up with a system to write it down perfectly and not make any mistakes. But many people had whole sections of ancient books and stories memorized. You can think of Homer with the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are basically two huge collections of Greek poems and myths that are compiled in a bigger narrative. Whoever the original Homer poet was someone who memorized all those stories. So he gets in the subway and he tries to go to Faber. He knows the address because Faber wrote it on that slip of paper. And going in the subway, he's got the book with him. So he's carrying a copy of the book with him. And once as a child, he had sat upon a yellow dune by the sea in the middle of the blue and hot summer day, trying to fill a sieve with sand, because some cruel cousin had said, "Fill this sieve and you'll get a dime." And the faster he poured, the faster it sifted through with a hot whispering. His hands were tired. The sand was boiling. The sieve was empty. Seated there in the midst of July without a sound, he felt the tears move down his cheeks. So he just read all that information and he can't remember any of it. The sand just went right through his brain. He can't memorize. He can't retain anything. So obviously to memorize something, you need very good retention of the material. And why can't he? We're going to see he's going to get bombarded with constant media stimulation, constant advertising. Now, as the vacuum underground rushed him through the dead cellars of town, jolting him, he remembered the terrible logic of that sieve, and he looked down and saw that he was carrying the Bible open. So he's carrying around a book in the open, he can get arrested. There were people in the suction chain, but he held the book in his hands, and the silly thought came to him, if you read fast and read all, maybe some sand will stay in the sieve. But he read, and the words fell through, and he thought, in a few hours, there will be Beatty, and here will be me handing this over, so no phrase must escape me. Each line must be memorized. I will myself to do it. He clenched the book in his fists. Trumpets blared, Denham's dentrifice. Shut up, thought Montag, consider the lilies of the field. Denham's dentrifice. This is a reference to the book of Matthew and Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. And we'll notice this video will end in about 10 seconds, but he keeps getting bombarded with the loud media everywhere. He can't think. He can't do anything. It just keeps blasting.